I'm Tony Ruiz of Gold Derby, here with Sean Heissinger and Matt Taylor, the Emmy-nominated and Emmy-winning, I might add, sound editors whose work is recognized this year for the final season of Barry. And I think I just really want to start with just a quick little education for viewers, because you hear a lot about sound editing, sound mixing. Can you just explain kind of either one of you as to, what it is your job specifically entails?
Yeah, I think for us, our main job is to meet with Bill and all the producers and editors and get their vision, and then as best we can relay that information to our editors and kind of see their vision come to life. Matt, I don't know if you want to.
No, that's pretty much it. Sean and I kind of share roles on it. I've been this season, I kind of went out and did a lot of sound recording for the season, especially at the prison they shot at. So, but yeah, that's pretty much it. At this point, season 4, there's a lot of shorthand too between us. So there's not a lot of, we kind of understand where the show wants to go sound-wise, be it also, it's always moving the kind of how they want to approach the sound on this. So I think a lot of that comes down to Sean just being there to help be the middle person, so to say.
Well, and what's interesting is how the show has evolved so much over the course of the 4 seasons. Did you guys find that the sound, just kind of the sound signature of the show has evolved over the course of it?
Go ahead, Sean. Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, it's been nice because both of us were on since the very beginning. So I guess it probably has evolved, but it feels real natural just because we've been kind of along for the journey the whole time. But
yeah, I think for me, I kind of look at it as like milestones in the whole series. I felt like, what was it, Sean? Like episode 2 or whatever it was of season 1, where they had the actors were putting on that stage show, and there was that one guy who had the pantomime show with sound effects. We did the same sound effects over the end credit roll, and that's when me, Sean, and Rick, the effects editor, were like, okay, there's something going on here with how they want to approach sound. And then Ronnie and Lily of season 2, that's where we're like, okay. And then the whole lion, bear, however you want to interpret it, jaguar thing in season 3, there's definitely been an approach to let's use sound to tell and also augment our story. And I think that's just been kind of, as Sean was saying, this thing that's kind of increased over the past 4 seasons, and you don't really notice it until you get to the end. You're like, oh yeah.
Yeah, and then you could kind of feel them writing it into the scripts more as the seasons went on too, where they specifically write scenes with us in mind, sound's going to do this here and it's going to help the scene in this way. So I feel like there was more of that as the seasons went along too.
Yeah, definitely.
And you guys are nominated for the finale, and I find it so interesting that you brought in specific moments from the previous seasons. What was it about the finale that stands out to you, just from a sound point of view?
I think, as you kind of said, Tony, we revisit a few motifs throughout the episode. One, the motif that we established kind of in season 4 of NoHo Hank and Cristobal, their kind of safe, homely area out in Albuquerque area. And then I think also too, just kind of the raging moments that Barry has throughout all of the seasons. We kind of revisit those themes as well. And then we throw it all away at the end for the movie, where it's just kind of the exact swing opposite of the aesthetic that Bill and Alec and everybody wanted to kind of push into the show from the very start.
Yeah, I think Bill was saying just whatever we've been doing, do the opposite for the movie, basically. Michael Bay it up, which that was fun for us, being able to kind of switch gears at the end.
Well, yeah, and I've had that conversation with other people, is that so much of the show, whether it's the tone or the sound or the violence or even the style of the acting, is so precise in the actual show that the movie portion is so brilliant because it's the exact opposite of that.
Yeah, yeah. It was fun. We got to let the Luke group go crazy with over the top reactions in the war and just kind of amp everything up a lot more than we're used to being able to do.
And that's funny because that whole sequence doesn't come too far on the tail of kind of what you said, Tony, is the succinct violence of that kind of standoff in the lobby there, which that was a whole other thing, just kind of how we went about that. But yeah, that's a stark contrast, very strict story chosen moments in that one.
Well, and I think, of course, so much of that standoff sequence is so brilliantly executed. And the scene leading up to it, the standoff between Fuchs and Hank. Sound wise, what are you guys doing in that big standoff moment? How does that come together?
Well, Bill always said he didn't want it big over the top, like didn't want it messy. He just wanted it to kind of be this culminating moment, and then all of a sudden it's over, and then there's just the aftermath. So it was real kind of, it cut to a lot of different people's perspectives, like right before the shot. So he wanted to feel everybody's kind of reactions, have it kind of feel real cutty, then just the guns, then all of a sudden it's kind of over. So I think it was just making it real clean and just crisp. And for Luke group, everybody's reactions on the floor, we kind of mapped just specific single reactions, just a lot of different takes for everybody that was still kind of alive, just so we could spread it out and have everything be real direct and like precise. And we ended up pairing a lot of that out in the end and having the like less is more with that type of thing. So you have the grenade go off, and then there's a moment of everything kind of settling, and then you hear people start moaning, and then Sally comes out from the pillar, and Fuchs picks up John and walks off, and then as you pan by, you kind of hear all these real specific moments of people on the floor and people like dying off to the side. And is kind of keeping it really clean, I think, was what I had in mind for that.
Yeah, because it's funny, like Sean, you hit upon something that I think that's always been stressed from the beginning is making really distinct but detailed choices in sound. Like, don't shove a bunch of stuff into a moment. What sounds are going to tell the story? And like, especially in that moment, he just wanted it's not overly cut in terms of like there's just a lot of stuff going on. It's just reactions, explosion, pain. Like, he wanted the action, the violence. He just wants to keep it tight, and just a lot of choices in thinning it out to a degree where you can hear everything as you hear everything we want you to hear, I guess, is kind of how Bill talked about it in the spotting, if I recall.
Mm-hmm. I would imagine that that part of the challenge of that is that kind of tracking shot as Fuchs is leading John out of the carnage and saying, "Oh, don't look over there. Oh, don't look over there." And we, the audience, are seeing and experiencing what he doesn't want John to see.
Exactly. Yeah. And then, recording everything separately gives you the options to kind of have this person trail off over there while this person's coming into frame from this side, and it just keeps everything real clean. And
I don't think people necessarily understand that a lot of that happens in the post-production process, in your guys' jobs, that those sounds and those moans and those expressions are not necessarily captured on the scene, on the set. They're captured elsewhere.
Yeah, I think for that scene, up until the grenade goes off, we kept as much production as we could for that part. But then after the explosion, Fuchs, Sally, John, all the people on the ground, that's all recorded after the fact and all in ADR and group. So you have Sally yelling. Oh, go ahead.
It's also part of the comedy, I think, too, is that it's what the show is so good at, is this concept of horror and yet still being comedic at the same time. I mean, do you guys find yourselves in the recording process just laughing?
Oh, like every day, pretty much. It's they toe the line really well of violent, but still being able to kind of shake your head and laugh at it, you know?
I feel like this season in particular, we were having to laugh at more violence. There was more kind of, there's definitely more comedy and violence in this season, I felt like, than the priors.
Yeah.
Well, and that's one of the things, staying on a show like this, how has your guys' craft, everybody I've talked to just from a craft perspective talks about taking something away from the experience of the show. What have you guys taken away from this experience?
If you have some, Sean, go for it. I'll have to think, because there's a few things.
But... Yeah, I mean, I think for me, like season 1, Matt supervised. I cut dialogue on that one, and then season 2 came around, and there were some scheduling conflicts, and had me step into the supervising role. And I mean, the show has been huge for me in just developing that part of my career and be more comfortable with those responsibilities. And a lot of the people like that we get to work with, it's like you work with the best of the best on the show, and everybody's so fun to work with and so nice. And seeing assistant editors become editors, and just everybody just watching everybody grow with the show, like Bill and everybody included, it's been a really good learning experience for everybody, I think.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good point you make, Sean, because I felt like this, everyone says working on a show has like a family vibe, but this one in particular, had a family vibe. And personally speaking, like to what you're asking, Tony, I feel like I've learned to listen more to what, I mean, it's our job, but I think I've become better at interpreting what people want for sound, because that's part of the job. Like when you talk to people who you're working for, there's a lot of adjectives tossed around about how they want things to sound and stuff like that. I think this show has definitely increased my skill in trying to interpret what people want from sound. And also I've learned a lot from people working on the show about making choices for sound for story as well, and what's important when you're cutting sound for story. So I think that's my biggest takeaway, I think.
Does doing the element of sound just in storytelling in general, when it comes to the movies and television, it adds so much, and yet to me some of the most impressive stuff is the stuff that maybe the audience doesn't catch. It's the stuff that they don't hear. Are there examples of that in Barry?
I guess I would ask you, Tony, what's an example for you? Because I have an idea. It's not an episode that's nominated, actually, but I'm curious what for you would stick out for something that audiences wouldn't necessarily catch, not necessarily on the show, but just in general.
Well, for example, like, all of the sequences in the prison, I think people just automatically don't realize the effort that goes into, there's an atmosphere in that space, and sound has a lot to do with it, I think. And so I'm curious, you were talking about how, getting sounds to fit that, and I'm just curious how you go about doing that.
Okay, that's a good question. I think well, Rick in particular, he did a great job of building a lot of that background atmosphere for where he was imprisoned. I also went out and recorded at that prison, at an active prison there amongst inmates, and recorded a lot of wall stuff that we ended up putting into the show as well. Also recorded a lot of announcement stuff on the yard that you're like, get down, like stuff like that we recorded to kind of throw in there. I know something too that people might not notice, and in whatever episode was the silo, I recorded binaurally when Cristobal goes into the sand, recorded 2 microphones just in bags of rice. So that's the only thing you hear is just, and it's kind of like an ASMR type of thing when he goes into the sand. That's the last thing you hear. So that might be something that people might not necessarily notice, and but what goes into the show, So, but yeah, a lot of the prison stuff, especially the Wallas, is recorded from the prison with actual inmates.
What about, I just want to ask, because I think about these scenes and it makes me laugh every time. What about the Dave and Buster stuff?
Oh, Sean's got a good
Were
story for that.
those as fun to put together, or were they a nightmare to put together?
It was pretty fun. We actually had Sean Evans cut effects on episode 2 where we introduced that, and he'd never been to Dave and Buster's, and I wanted to go to just get an idea of like what PAs would sound like, what they're saying over the PAs and what they call the party rooms, and just to get the vibe of it. So I went to the Dave and Buster's over in Northridge and was just on my phone walking around, kind of like videoing all the different areas of it, and just walked through the arcade, walked through the bar, and then got shut down by security, and they told me I couldn't film. So it was basically just to get a picture for Sean to see, like, there's air hockey over here, arcades or whatnot. And he actually ended up using the audio from that, I believe, as I walked around, as like a base for it. So it was just building a lot of arcades and air hockey, and then you've got the bar area where people are making drinks, and the party rooms over here. So it wasn't a nightmare, I wouldn't say, to put together. It's fun when you have places like that where you can add so many different layers and there's stuff way over there that can kind of poke out every once in a while, and it just gives a lot of depth to
especially for somebody like Hank, who is the biggest kid of them all.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. And like you had like a lot of vignette type of pocket stuff going on throughout that scene, because like, yeah, you move through that area and there's just tons of little various things going on.
Well, gentlemen, congratulations, for years and years of great work, and best of luck at the Emmys. Everybody go to goldderby.com, make your predictions, and stay tuned for interviews with more contenders throughout Emmy season. Sean Heissinger and Matt Taylor from Barry, thank you both so much.
All right, thanks so much for having us.